Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending this event with Stephen Graham Jones and David Heska Wanbli Weiden. We are honored to have them both here from Colorado today. Stephen Graham Jones is the author of 16 and a half novels, 6-story collection, a couple of standalone novellas, and a couple of one-shot comic books. He's an NEA recipient, has won the Texas Institute of Arts and Letters Award. He's an Independent Publisher Award winner, a Bram Stoker Award winner. He's also made the Bloody Disgusting Top 10 horror novels and the guy who wrote Mongrels. So his latest book is The Only Good Indians, which has been received huge critical acclaim. And he also has another new book, The Night of the Mannequins. And he lives in Boulder, Colorado. David is an enrolled member of the Sekongu Lakota Nation. He is the author of a debut novel, The Winter Count, and it was chosen by the Library Journal and USA Today, Crime Reads, BuzzFeed, Rumpus, and Book Riot, and as a book pick. And he's also the author of the children's book, The Spotted Tail, which is a biography of the great Lakota leader and winner of the 2020 Spur Award from the Western Writers of America. He teaches at, he's a professor at the Metropolitan State University in Denver, and he lives in Colorado with these two sons. So please welcome Stephen and David.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Well, I guess we're going to do a little reading. And am I going to go first, Stephen? Is that cool? Or
go for it, man. I'll turn my camera off so I'm not distracting people.
All right. Oh, wow. And that avatar is something that you got there, that photo. Hey, everyone. I'm David Heska Wanbli Weiden. I'm Petu Washte. I'm Achiapi David. It's, good day. My name is David, and I'm really honored to be here today because I did some of my graduate work in Vermont at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and I'm very pleased and honored to be on the faculty there right now in the writing and publishing program at VCFA. And indeed, just last night, I did a reading. So I feel very tied to Vermont, and it's just wonderful to be here. And especially with my buddy, Stephen Graham Jones, who he and I have done a couple of panels together in readings, and we always just have a great time. So I'm just going to read a short passage from my book, Winter Counts, which was released in August from Echo HarperCollins, August 25th. I will start off, though, by doing a little land acknowledgement. So this is kind of odd in Zoom because we're scattered really all over the country, if not the world. But I will honor my own land here. So I am in Denver, Colorado, on Cheyenne and Northern Arapaho land. So I just like to acknowledge the indigenous people upon whose land that I stand. So anyway, my pleasure to be here. Winter Counts, it was chosen as a New York Times editor's choice, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But more than that, it's just been a real pleasure to connect with readers and fans, native and non-native. So I'm just going to read a short passage from Winter Counts. The setup to Winter Counts is this. The book deals with an antiquated law that still exists on Native American reservations called the Major Crimes Act. The Major Crimes Act says that Native nations may not prosecute felonies that occur on their own lands. They must instead turn these felony cases over to the US government, the FBI, and the US Attorney's Office. And that's fine, except that about 30 to 40% of the time, the FBI and US Attorney's Office they are not prosecuting these crimes. They are refusing, they are declining them. And so the offenders are set free. And so this has contributed to a real atmosphere of lawlessness on many Native reservations. And what has happened is a class of professional vigilantes have sprouted up in many reservations. That is the protagonist, the hero of my book, Virgil Wounded Horse. if someone hurts your child or your sister or your mother and you can't get any justice from the American government, you hire Virgil, who for $100 he charges $100 for each tooth he knocks out and each bone he breaks. So that is the story of Winter Counts. The setup here is Virgil has been hired to stop heroin from being brought in to the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And so he is traveling with his ex-girlfriend, Marie Shortbear, and they are traveling to Denver, but they stop in Nebraska on the way. And here is then an account of what happens to them when they take a brief rest stop in Nebraska. So again, we're in the head of Virgil Wounded Horse, and he's traveling with his girlfriend, Marie. Marie turned the music off abruptly. You ever seen this? I forgot about it till now. What? Look over there. The sign by the parking lot declared car henge, and below that, in smaller letters, entrance. We pulled into the empty parking lot. What's all this? I said, getting out of the car. Look behind you, she said. I blinked a few times. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. About 20 old cars were buried in the ground, front bumper down, standing straight up like monoliths. They were arranged in a large circle, and I realized that they were obviously some sort of bizarre homage to Stonehenge. Not only were the cars buried on their edges, the artist had placed some autos on top of the others as a kind of cap or connector, just like at the real Stonehenge monument. There were a few cars buried on their sides in the center of the circle, serving as the focus of the installation. Crazy, huh? Marie said, looking up at the vehicles, which were all painted a uniform gray. Graffiti scarred some of the cars' bodies. I saw Archie Sucks, I Love Mahitabel, Daddy Longlegs, and in the corner, Wanagi Takaku. We walked around the circle. I'll say, who did this? I don't know, she said. Some guy with too much time on his hands. I read a little about him last time I was here. My first impulse was to mock the crazy man who'd created this weird folk art and make cynical comments about the ways of the Washichus. After all, what sort of cracked person spends their free time building giant sculptures at an abandoned farmstead in Nebraska? It must have taken years to create this odd melange of old autos in the middle of nowhere. We stood there for a while in the shadow of the statues and walked around the circle together. As we strolled between the buried vehicles, I began to appreciate the scale of what the artist had attempted. These were full-size American automobiles, buried, welded together, and painted gray, bottom to top. The artist clearly had a vision, a dream of what he wanted to express. A cynical statement about American consumerism? I didn't think so. For some reason, I had the feeling that the creator of this monument was guided by some deeper philosophy. There were no fees for admission, no chain link fences keeping out gawkers. It seemed to me that the artist had been driven by a goal to convey some deeply held conviction expressed through the medium of 1970s automobiles. I wandered off by myself to the edge of the circle. It was quiet at the site, no one there except for Marie and me. I positioned myself at one end of the circle so that I could see the entire thing. In the silence, I began to appreciate the weird majesty of the buried cars. I thought about what it must have felt like 4,000 years ago to stand before the real monoliths in England and feel connected, truly connected to the earth, the stars, and the spirits. I stared at the cars so long that my head began to spin, and it felt like I was drifting off into space, floating in the heavens. Time seemed to stop, and the Lakota phrase, Mitakaye Oyasin, we are all related, came to me. And in that moment, I understood what those words meant. I inhabited them as images, thoughts, and memories arose amidst the old vehicles. I saw my mother, gone but still with me, my father who died too soon, and my sister who I'd loved like my own life. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, they appeared before me, all of my relations, my ancestors, native and white, who'd loved and struggled, hunted and gathered, worked and played. They'd stood on this continent, looking up at these stars and these planets. It was daylight, but I could see the stars now, all of them. surrounding me, lighting the air, their brilliance shining and radiating off the monoliths. And then it was dark, a black hole sky. But I looked down and saw that the stars, every one of them, were now in my hands, lighting up my veins, my muscles, my bones. I stood there alone with my ancestors and I listened to them. Finally, I turned away. As I walked back to my life, the words my mother used to say finally came to me. Wakantanka Nichiun, may the Creator guide you. Thank you, guys.
I'll clap for everybody, man. Thank you, Dave. That's amazing. And that car hinge, it makes me realize I could do a hinge in my front yard, but it'd be like printers. You know, I could use all my old printers because printers go bad like every 6.5 seconds. You know, I was looking at our 2 covers too. Is this framed right? And we both have animals on front. I guess that's what they do to Indian books. They're like, you got to have an animal on the front of an Indian book, you know. But I like your buffalo though. That's a slick buffalo, man. Turn it sideways. You can run it, man. It's fun. I
like your cover too. I'm going to mute myself now so you can read.
All right, I'll take off and read, man. Let's see. I'm going to read. Actually, I won't read from Only Good Indians or Night of the Mannequins. I'm going to read something different for y'all today. I'm going to read from Attack of the 50-Foot Indian, and it's a short story that came out. Man, I don't know, June, somewhere around there, somewhere in the summer it came out. In these COVID times, it all feels like one long day, you know, but I'll read you a little bit of it. You don't need any setup, I don't think. I'm reading off my screen too, so hopefully this goes well. Hopefully nothing freezes. Attack of the 50-Foot Indian. The first reports to go viral on social media were grainy and honestly looked pretty doctored. A giant unconscious man, half in, half out of the Bering Sea. The half of him out of the water was washed up on Siberia. By the time he turned up on higher resolution satellite photos, still just lying there, his face buried in the crook of his right arm as if sleeping one off, a team of Navy SEALs was looping a thick cable around one of his submerged ankles. The other end of that cable was hooked into the American submarine, breaking a stack of accords and agreements by being this far out of its own waters. It was a gamble. Soldiers' lives hung in the balance. Careers back in DC were in jeopardy, and scapegoats were already lined up to be fed headfirst to the media. Still, once that submarine's propeller fired up, after a tense moment where the water just churned and bubbled and frothed, the giant unconscious man broke free of the frozen gravel shore and scraped down the long incline into waters where salvage laws could be said to apply. Once out into those more neutral depths, he jerked awake all at once and flung his head up for air. And that was when the circling helicopters captured the first high-resolution video footage of his long black hair, flinging around to clear his face. He bellowed, his massive hand coming up to protect his nose from all this burning seawater, and in doing so, his right arm tangled in the tow cable. The submarine, still attached to that cable, sloshed back against his hip, knocking him sideways in the water, and he was still looking back at what could have hit him when he slipped under the surface, the ocean floor dropping sharply off right where he was trying to stand. The submarine bobbed for a moment, then was yanked down by the cable still looped around the giant man's ankle. The surface of the Bering Sea smoothed back out as if no international incident had almost happened. In the minutes before the ripples from that dunking amplified into the waves that would wash up into 5 o'clock traffic in Nome, every phone in every government office in America lit up, each of them demanding explanation. Had this giant man been a normal-sized person who had somehow grown into this behemoth? Had he fallen from somewhere? Had he swum up from the depths? Weren't Leviathans supposed to have tentacles, though? Was he a decoy of some sort? If so, to what purpose? Could this be an art installation, a Trojan horse situation? But what technology could make him seem so alive? Was he even human? How could he be? And what was with all that hair? The video footage was zapped back to the mainland, slowed down enough to capture the geometry of his face, the set of his eyes, those cheekbones, and the color of his skin. He wasn't simply burned or tanned from lying in the winter sun without clothes, which had been the initial supposition at the Pentagon. That was his natural complexion. Was he Indian? If so, American or Asian? But why not Polynesian or Saudi Arabian or Mexican or Mayan or Hawaiian or African? And taking the region into account, shouldn't he be Yupik or Inupiat, Aleut or Samoyed? But none of them are that tall, are they? All this speculation in approximately 12 minutes and 37 seconds. It was stopped by the giant man surfacing again with a desperate gasp, the water surging around him. He was sitting astride the submarine, which was rocking back and forth, finding its level. This was important because now his waist and pelvis and smooth upper thighs were heaving into view between the waves. He wasn't wearing a thobe or board shorts or muslin pants or any kind of brightly colored wrap or grass skirt. He was in what looked to be a loincloth. So he is Indian, a con officer said, rocking with a submarine like he just inserted a quarter for this ride. Is that okay to say? A petty officer listening in asked all around. Never mind that, the 3-star vice admiral behind her said, clicking the DEFCON dial over 2 whole notches at once. What century is this so-called Indian supposed to be from? More important, his staff was already asking, what animal could that loincloth have been made from? There was no apparent stitching or seams. This was a small strip of an even larger piece of leather, but what animal even approached that size? None. It would take multiple moose for a garment of that length and breadth, and you can't really make leather from the skin of a blue whale. The Indian didn't care. He was just sitting astride the submarine, hands wrapped around the conning tower like the saddle horn of a stolen horse. His long black hair was plastered to his chest, and those cheekbones, that nose, that grim slash of a mouth. He wasn't just Indian, according to the experts the government was able to hustle in and swear to secrecy. He was probably, judging by dress pattern and hairstyle, Plains. 19th century, those experts were asked. The experts said, sure, 19th century, or 18th, 17th, on back for thousands of years, there was no way of knowing. Maybe just from now, too. More important, tactically speaking, was he the only one? Satellites were retasked, soundings were taken, tabloids were scoured, urban legends and ancient religions were consulted. Meanwhile, moving slowly so as not to spook him, the captain ordered his submarine east to the safety of American shores. The Indian leaned back when the submarine pulled forward, but he held on and sort of smiled. The Navy, of course, tried to clear the waters ahead of this Indian, but that didn't stop the sky from filling with gawkers. This was a story of the century, of the millennium. This was a legend in the making. What will he eat? The newspapers cried. Where will he sleep? The anchor people read from cue cards. What will the toilet situation be? The DJs whispered into their mics. More like whose side will he be on? The government officials didn't say in any press releases. What they meant, of course, was did he remember? If he was from anywhere after 1492, then his estimation of America probably wouldn't be too rosy. So, of course, they shot him in the thigh with a tranquilizer. He was just coming into Puget Sound. There was heavy fog that morning. The Indian reached down to the hem-sized dart sticking up from his leg. He breathed in deep to extract it, then held it before his face, studied the strange arrow. He looked up to the Seattle skyline as if just seeing it, as if trying to take it with him, and then he slumped off the submarine into Elliott Bay, his hair instantly tangling in the propeller, the captain diving for the shutoff button. The Indian fell onto the rising flotilla of webbed-together tractor tire inner tubes that had been secreted underwater, only inflated at the last minute with canisters of CO2. His face never went underwater. That was important, as the fear was that a sense of drowning might override the wave of narcotics sloshing through his system. And so he was floated into America on a bier of sorts, cargo choppers thumping in from all corners of the sky to lift him across the suburbs. His long hair dripping water that people in their backyards were running to catch in cups to have a little piece of history. On the 11 o'clock news were eyewitness accounts of there having been 2 moons in the sky that night, one brown and one yellow, and so that became his name, 2 moons. That didn't stop him from waking under 1 moon, though. I'll stop there. It goes on, and he kind of turns into King Kong in America, except for he's an Indian, you know? It's fun. Thank you. Hey, hey Dave, I was going to ask you when I was listening to you read, at any point when you were writing this, did it ever have a different title, your novel?
No, I've told this story before, but I will tell it again. I always wanted to call it Winter Counts. I will tell you that my editor wanted me to change it to Buffalo Nation. And, and I thought that was a fair title, but I felt strongly that Winter Counts was the right title. So Now in France, I've sold it, and they are calling it, I don't speak French, Justice Indienne, so Indian Justice.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's what it's going to be
Yeah.
called over there.
Nice.
And it's I sold it in Germany as well, and I have no idea what they're going to call it. So this is my first experience with the Germans. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah,
Tim.
Oh, is Tim here? I don't know, but I just saw the Russian version of the Only Good Indians, and I don't have no idea what it's called. I don't even know, but I'm sure it's something that is good, But Indian Justice, I could have called my novel Indian Justice too. We could both our novels kind of fit under Indian Justice,
I asked him if Winter Counts translated into French, and he said no. It's just it doesn't translate the right way, and they're the experts. So Indian Justice it is, and I think it's coming out in January in France. So
yeah, nice.
Anyway, there you go.
Excellent, man. Excellent.
Tim, are you with us? I see you on the screen. I see the
Yes,
name.
I am here. I mean, I can turn on my video too, so you can actually see me. There we go. Hi there.
Hello.
Why don't you continue talking? We don't seem to have a question yet. We got a couple of comments. Stephen, you have a wonderful cadence to your words. Do you write poetry or prose? From Barbara Lemoine. And Darla Hitchcock, I love the subtle or not so subtle humor in your work, Stephen.
Probably not so subtle. No, I don't, man. I can write Def Leppard lyrics and it looks like a poem, but I don't really do poetry. I've never I can't think in lines,
No.
Oh well, Hey, currently, Dave, with my next novel, I'm in the process of cover approval, where we're trying to wrangle and figure out the right cover and all. What input did you have on your cover, or did you have any?
I did. The wonderful cover. If anybody wants to see it again, I'll hold it up one more time. I love. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. Sarah Wood did the cover. She's in the stable of designers at Echo, and they gave me 2 or 3 different designs, and I took to this one right away. But they were all superb. I'm really lucky. Echo has just some talented folks. Are you getting Stephen some input on your cover? Or?
I am getting some input. Yeah, like I'm with Saga now, but it's funny because I've been with a whole lot of publishers, and all of my contracts always say I will have cover input. And in the past, cover input has always been they send me like a 4-pack or a 6-pack, different little workups, and I'm like, man, 5 is where it's at. 5 is perfect. How'd y'all do this so perfect? And they're like, all right, it's 2. That's how it usually works. But no, Saga's giving me input, which is nice. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'll encourage the audience to put a question in for either Stephen or David or for both of them, and they'll be able to field them.
Hey, Dave, has anybody in all these Q&As you're doing, has anyone asked you yet if Virgil is from all the Greek stuff? Is it the name? Have they made any associations?
Have they asked if he's from where?
Like, it wasn't Virgil was he was a guide of was it Gothic? Who do you know who Virgil was, Tim?
Yeah, he was a poet. That was guided into I think the underworld by Aeneas.
Okay. He's in the Aeneid. All right, cool.
All right, yeah.
I have been asked that, and I again, I've told this story before. Winter Counts originally was a short story that I wrote when I was a graduate student about 10 years ago, and I wish I could tell you that I had thought through the allusions of calling him Virgil, but it was honestly just kind of unconscious, which is what I think we often do as writers. Is just we put stuff in, and we may not even realize all of what's in there. The only thing that I built in pretty consciously in Winter Counts is I put in some two hidden tributes, one to a well-known native writer and one to a crime writer. So I put in lots of really, really subtle clues in there. They won't be that subtle to crime fiction fans, but I built in 2 homages. So but the rest of it honestly was just kind of unconscious. Stephen, I'll put it to you. Do you how much do you think about the names of your characters? Do you somehow use those names to allude to others, or?
No, I never do. Like I always think of names as a game that I don't play. Like I'm happy. I want all my characters to be named Martin. If I can name every character Martin, I would be thrilled. But it would probably get confusing at some point. But I just try to go with the simplest nothing name. Well, I say the simplest nothing name. In this one, actually, the Only Good Indians, one of the protagonists' name is a joke, Lewis A. Clark. You know, Lewis and Clark. Because I'm always real proud of the fact that when Lewis and Clark were doing their big old mapping expedition, that the Blackfeet were the only nation that pushed back. You know, they ended up shooting a couple of us actually, and yeah, we were trying to steal some of their guns. You know, and
Oh wow.
yeah, so it was fun. It was funny to me to name him Lewis Clark. But like, there's in this novel, there's Cass and Gabe and Ricky, and people have pretty normal names. Yeah. When I first started out writing, I would strain like this has to be a name that nobody's ever heard, but that also sounds natural, you know. And it's so you can't do if you want to like have an output of more than one story, you can't do that for very long, you know, because you quickly run out of names. But I've never done the illusion thing, like harkening back to. I mean, I guess I have with Lewis and Clark possibly, but I would never go back as far as Greek stuff. But it is interesting that when you say Virgil, that there is a certain small pie wedge of the readership that's going to say, "Oh, Virgil, you know, I know what he's doing now." You know.
So we've got a couple of 3 questions, and the first one, which has been sort of thumbs up to the first place, is by an anonymous attendee, and it says the genre of horror and sci-fi has begun to be associated with Native or First Nations writers. Sherry Dimeline comes to mind, but there are others. How do you feel about this, or do you think about it?
I don't think about it myself, but there are a lot of us doing stuff on the genre spectrum, the genre end of things, including Dave doing crime, you know, because crime is as much a genre as science fiction, fantasy, horror, any of it. You know, my take on it is that for so long, the American, I don't know, critical establishment and the market too. The market is kind of influenced by the critical establishment, have wanted to keep American Indian fiction like close to the main trunk, if that makes it, of literature. Like if literature is a tree, they want us to stay close to the big trunk, where you write like stuff that's just like drama or literary or whatever you want to call stuff that doesn't have spaceships and werewolves, you know, and car chases. I think the reason for that is because that kind of fiction, there's nothing wrong with that kind of fiction at all. That kind of fiction is easier for them to come out with the set of tools they already have, which kind of reveal traditions in the oral culture or deal with the politics of identity and just all that stuff, you know. But I think there's a lot of writers right now, especially in the last like 5 years, it feels like, who are running out onto the thin branches and of science fiction, fantasy, horror, crime, everything, you know, and we're like, we don't need your permission anymore. We don't want to do the stuff that you already have a tool set for. We want to do stuff that makes us happy, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
And I want to jump in on that because Mr. Jones, Dr. Jones over there is very modest, and Stephen Graham Jones has in fact written some crime novels himself, which I have in print praised and will do so verbally here again. Probably one of the 5 most influential books in my writing career was All the Beautiful Sinners, written by Stephen, which we talked about in the last panel we did, and I've talked about. I recently published an article in Crime Reads on why Indigenous crime fiction matters. And I argue that the most important Indigenous crime writer was Lewis Owens, and I've argued that Stephen Graham Jones is his direct heir, because Stephen pioneered a style of following Lewis Owens of Indigenous crime fiction that incorporated elements of surreality, you know, and so you can track down that article. It's available for free. But I know crime fiction best in the genre, and what I'm trying to do is in my work is I'm trying to use crime fiction to not only obviously tell a great story, because that's what we all want to do, but I'm trying to incorporate explicit activist and political elements here. Okay, so I I teach Native American studies in my day job, and I can write a lot of academic papers that 20 people are going to read. But if I can spark a dialogue among many more people about some of the legal issues that Indigenous folks are facing in America, that's what I'm trying to do. But story always comes first. Okay. So I will end it there.
Okay. Let's see, we've got two others here. Could each writer talk a little bit about how they came to be authors? And let me throw both of these questions out to you. And authors in a previous session talked about the story being given to them. And I wonder if your story sprang from incidents or people you experienced, evolved from a process of writing, or ? So how you came to be writers and how do these stories happen?
And I went first last time, Dave. You want to jump on it, man?
Sure. I mean, these are great questions. Thank you, folks, for giving them to us. You know, how I became to be a writer, I had a much more roundabout way than probably Stephen did. I was a lawyer for a handful of years till it became quite clear that I'm just not really suited for that. And then I became a teacher at the university level. And it wasn't really until, midlife that I said, I need to pursue this dream that I've always wanted to do. So I enrolled at Vermont College of Fine Arts and later transferred to the Institute of American Indian Arts, where Stephen is on the faculty, as well as CU Boulder. And so I was able to study with really this roster of superstar Native writers. And so I've been working on my craft for, yay, VSF, hi, hey, Ann. So I've been working on my craft for a long time. So that was sort of the road that I took. And as far as, the story being given to me, briefly, the story of Winter Counts is influenced by real events. I do not know any hired professional vigilantes on my own, nor have I ever been one. Never say never. If this writing and professor gig doesn't work out, who knows? It can, it's possibly another career path. But the story was given to me in that I incorporated a lot of elements of my own life. It's not just a crime novel. It's also a story about identity, about Virgil being an Heska, which is in our language, a slur for being a half-breed. I brought in a lot of stuff there. So the story was given to me in that I used a lot of my own experience to flesh it out and make it truthful. So thank you for the questions.
Yeah, like Dave, I incorporate, I think I can make nothing real on the page that I haven't to some degree felt myself, and no, I've never in my novel, somebody might kill someone and I've never killed someone, as far as I know, hopefully not, but I have maybe in junior high, I broke up with somebody, that well, just arbitrarily, stupidly, and I hurt someone is what I'm saying, possibly. I mean, I'm probably way overplaying my importance in their life, of course, but I hurt someone's feelings at some point in my life, and I can magnify that up into killing someone, possibly, But as for where I came to writing, I grew up working off a tractor and working off a horse, and so I kind of had two career paths open to me. I could try to be a cowhand in a time when there were no cowhands, really. You can't, it's hard to make a living. You can be a weekend cowboy, but it's hard to be a full-time cowboy. Or I could drive tractor. And so I thought driving tractor is going to be more steady work. And that was always my goal. I was going to graduate high school somehow, which I ended up not really doing, but I was going to graduate high school and lease a tractor and just be a farmer, a custom farmer. A custom farmer is what you go plow other people's fields because you don't have your own land. You're kind of working by the hour, by the job, that kind of stuff. But then when I graduated, my mom took me out to dinner and she gave me a suitcase. She said, you got to get out of town. The town's going to eat you up. And she also said, I've saved up enough money. You can go to one semester of college. Cause she said, I've noticed you're always reading books. Cause I was always reading books, just everything I could find. And she said, you need to be around people who read books, And so I did it. I went off to school for a semester. And sure enough, I sat down in the right classroom. In that classroom, people were talking about a book we had read as if it mattered. And I had never in my life been around people who talked about books as if they mattered. That just totally blew my mind. And so, I worked a lot of jobs and made my way through the rest of it. But I was a philosophy major. I wasn't, which would have led to law, like you, Dave, possibly, But I also don't have the right temperament for law, I don't think. I love writing briefs. I used to edit briefs, but I don't know if I have the the wit or the quick thinking to be a trial lawyer. Anyways, that's a whole different breed of people, I feel like. But what happened was the police officers came and got me from my World Lit 2 lecture one day and delivered me to the ICU in the town I was in. And one of my uncles had been burned really, really badly. They didn't expect him to live. And I was the only family of his they could find anywhere in West Texas. And so I sat there for 3 days waiting for him to live or die. And all I had with me is what I had in class, a spiral and a pen. And I got bored and I wrote a little 10-page story. And I came back to my composition class on the following Monday, and I had not done my homework because I'd been in the hospital. And I said, here, maybe this will get me some credit. So I tore those pages out, gave it to the teacher, and I thought maybe I'll get a 30 instead of 100, and that'll be better than nothing. But she liked it, and she gave it to someone on the creative writing faculty, and they typed it up and entered it into a contest, and I won that contest, and I got $150. And I was like, you mean you can turn lies into money? That was the biggest eye opener. I had no idea. So I stayed a philosophy major, but I kept on entering contests and getting lucky and getting publications, selling stories. And it's still weird to me that you can just get money for telling lies. That blows me away. And I always feel like I'm cheating. But as for where stories come from, I feel like I just stand around in my head and kind of listen, and out of my peripheral vision, I see something flash by, and if I time my steps right, I can run over and grab its tail and just hold on, and I just ride it until it loses air or loses me, one of the two,
We've got another question here. What is the most intriguing discovery you made while writing or preparing to write these books?
I guess this isn't for this book necessarily, but a while back, like 18, 20 years, a publisher wanted me to write a serial killer novel for them. And so they said, go to the library, get every serial killer book you can and read it, because we're going to pay you a lot of money to write serial killer books. And I figured, what the heck? So I went to the public library, got a stack of everything that said serial killer on it, or had the subject heading serial killer. I brought it home, and I was just plowing through those books. And then there's this one big book, the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers by Harold Schechter, I think it was. And I sat back in my chair and I opened that book, and every single page of that book was filled with this fine cut black hair, and it spilled into my lap, and I thought, I'm being framed, so what I learned was to be careful about community books. I mean, libraries are wonderful, but you can also be framed for crime, I think.
Well, I'll jump in. I just want to say, regarding the last thing you said about growing up, Stephen, you and I have hung out obviously in real life and chatted and all this. And I think this is the first time that I've ever heard that story. And and just not story, but so much just the background. And, and I didn't realize we were so similar, because neither one of my parents went to college. And it was, there wasn't really an expectation that they were going to be able to pay for me. So I had to kind of work my way through college, and I made the safe choice of being a lawyer, which may or may not have been smart. Anyway, but that's long in the past. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. I never knew that about you, dude. So about the discovery of what, so not so much in Winter Counts, but there's a discovery. I also write some creative nonfiction, and I have an essay in the literary journal Shenandoah about my grandmother's time at the Carlisle Indian School, the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. So the Carlisle School, if folks don't know, as well as other Native boarding schools, for about 50, 70 years, about 30 to 40% of all Native kids were snatched. They were taken from their parents without consent, and often shipped halfway across the country to these boarding schools where they weren't allowed to practice their spirituality, speak their language. They were too often, sad to say, abused physically and sexually. So my own grandmother was one of those poor souls. She was at the Carlisle Indian School. But here's the discovery that I made. I had done a search for her, and I was able to get her letters from the Library of Congress. They sent them to me, letters from her time. She was in the last decade or so of the Carlisle Indian School before it shut down. And in her letters, she loved this school. She loved it. In these letters, she would write, I really miss old Carlisle. And I was devastated by this, because I wanted my grandmother to be this fierce warrior that had rebelled and tried to burn down the school and all this. And so, for years, I kept it kind of quiet. I was kind of ashamed of her, to be honest, because I wanted her to be a rebel. But then I kept working and thinking and investigating. And I came across some more correspondence and discussions with my family members. And I found out that later in life, she rebelled against all of what she had been indoctrinated with at the Carlisle Indian School. And all of her kids were gone. She moved out to a shack on our reservation, no electricity, no running water. And she spent her last 3 years there just being Indian again, being Native, and rejecting what they had drummed into her head. And this for me, it was like a weight had come off my shoulders, because for a decade, I'd been keeping this story kind of quiet and never sharing it. But then I realized that she in fact reclaimed her own Indian identity. And that for me was a discovery that really meant a lot. And so that's not in this book, but that essay, if this sounds at all vaguely interesting, the journal Shenandoah, it's freely available. So thank you for that wonderful question.
Wow. So thank you both for your stories, and especially for your, the stories that about yourselves, the story about your grandmother, your story about how, Stephen, how you ended up discovering, books and from there, how you learned how to, to take that and go and learn how to write and stuff like that from the terrible incident of your was it your uncle?
Uncle, yeah.
Yeah. But that's quite something. We're about to, let's see, I think yes, we do have two more here if we've got the time. Let's see. Someone in chats has a, do either of you have other book off? Well, let me get this, and then there's, I think, one last one. Do either of you have other book author recommendations?
Oh man, we don't have enough time. We got so many.
Yeah, right.
Rebecca Roanhorse's Black Sun just came out this week, and it's an amazing second world fantasy novel that everyone should read, I think.
I'll jump in and recommend two of my buddies. Brandon Hobson is a wonderful Native author. He was nominated for the National Book Award a couple of years ago for Where the Dead Sit Talking. He's now got a book coming out from Echo, my imprint, called The Removed, which is coming out in February. That is already getting all sorts of buzz. It just got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. And hey, my friend Kelly Jo Ford, y'all, if you haven't read Crooked Hallelujah, read that. And if you have a decade or two, Mr. Stephen Graham Jones has 25, 30 books. So don't, and pretty much every genre. I think he even has a book on taxidermy and, Peruvian history. So, I mean, he's got it all. So, don't overlook his work.
Okay. We have one last question, which I hope maybe you can answer which came through in chats. There's actually two. One is, where do you teach? But the other one is, you are both tribally enrolled and incorporate Native culture and experiences into your work. How do you feel about being identified because of that as Indian writers? That's in quotes. Does it feel appropriate to you or limiting?
I've always been Indian, so it feels right. But at the same time, I remember when Louise Erdrich, when she came out in the early 80s and people were calling her, the next Native American author and all this stuff, she kind of pushed back against that, and I think that was a wise choice by her, because anytime you allow the public to put an adjective in front of your name, I think that's the first step towards dismissing you, or putting you on a shelf anyways, and then not having to engage with you so much. I'm proud to be Blackfeet, of course, but I just always feel the only adjective I really want is best-selling. That's the only adjective I want in front of me.
Well, I concur with Stephen. I'm Lakota, and my grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great, they're buried on the reservation. This is who I am. So it doesn't feel weird or limiting. It just feels like who I am. But having said that, I think what Stephen and I have as I guess we're being identified as genre writers. If anything bothers me, it's that, because I think we're just writers. But I love being identified as a crime writer, because the crime fiction community, they've just embraced my work, and they don't say, oh, this is the great Native crime book. They're just like, this is just a great crime book.
Yeah.
So I'm really honored by that, and I embrace, if look, I get a lot of emails and fan mails and stuff. I know you do as well, Stephen. You have what, 7,000 reviews on Goodreads? I just read the other night. You know, I'm at like 3,000. You know, and I get like a lot of emails from folks saying, "Look, I didn't know about this reality on Native reservations, and now I know." And I'm really excited. And I've also gotten a video from a Native person crying, like I've embraced my heritage again. I'm not going to turn away from that. I'm proud if I can bring some awareness of what it means to be Native and you know, do some good in the world. Yeah, I embrace that.
Thank you.
And also talking, I think that we're lucky that Dave came through the legal system to fiction writing, because he's able to bring a way of articulating the legal issues such that it doesn't come across didactic, it comes across casual. And I think you only can do that when you really know something, you know?
Yeah. One last thing, somebody says, Stephen, Rebecca who?
Roan Horse.
Okay.
Roan Horse.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And I'm sorry I wasn't here to introduce you at the beginning, but I got to ask some questions and meet you online, so to speak. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
Later, Dave.
Thank you all.
Jim.
See you, Stephen. Bye-bye, everybody.